Today I'm meeting again with private investigator Shawn Merlen of Master Investigations, and we're so glad to have you back again.
It's good to be back.
And so we encourage you to watch the other video that we've made with Shawn, but he's going to tell us today about a couple of adventures in private investigating, but also in the context of things that private investigators do, some of which they can and should do, some of which they are not allowed to do, that's illegal and or could be counterproductive, that could end up with you spending a lot of money on a private investigator that won't do you any good if your evidence is not admissible in court.
Exactly.
So Shawn talked a little bit about it with me over before we started, and so I'll just leave it to you, and you can start with what you want to talk about.
Okay, well, I wanted to give a little story out. That's a hot topic now, and that's older people being taken advantage of, or what we call predatory action. I just dealt with an older lady. She lost her husband recently, went into a mall, was roaming around and got picked up by one of the cosmetic stores. You know, he asked her, "How are you? What's wrong? You know, you seem down." And she told him that her husband just passed away, and he said, "Well, come on in, let me give you a facial." So he gave her a free facial and then proceeded to what we call predatory, do a predatory action on her, which meant that when she walked out of there, bottom line is she had $30,000 in cosmetics.
30,000.
Not 3,000, 30,000.
She wasn't even shopping for cosmetics.
No.
She was just wandering.
She was just wandering, trying to stay away from home because of her husband, because he passed away and home was too familiar. So I took it on myself, and along with her daughter and another lady, we went there, and it was a long process. He even went to the extent where he told her, "Your husband would want you to have these things to make yourself look better." And so we went there and talked. At first they weren't going to do anything, but after some negotiation, I guess you'd say, we managed to resolve the issue where she would pay a 3% stalking fee plus any makeup that she'd opened, and they would take it back. All I can say is, as far as, you know, if you're going to buy something over $5,000 that you're not prepared to, that you hadn't thought about, take the day, go home, give it some thought, and if the next day you wake up and you're ready, and this is what I told the lady, go back and buy it. But the next day she woke up and realized what a mistake she's made, and that's why myself and her daughter and others got involved to try to fix it for her.
You came along with some other people. You're the one that did the recording.
I did the recording.
The video, so that in case there was any trouble.
Right, we just wanted to prove, because, you know, I mean, they get hostile when you're talking about that much money. However, this store, the man that was there was really calm. It was the guy on the phone that was throwing a fit because he didn't want to lose the commission on $30,000. However, we worked it out where the percentage, you know, for the restocking fee is going to pay for what he would have lost, and she gets about $26,000 back. So
because of what she'd already opened.
Right,
well,
right.
That's a happy ending. That's good.
I don't understand $30,000 in cosmetics, but
apparently it can be done.
What do you buy for 30? You know. Anyway, just want to let you guys know there's some things if you take and think, okay, I'm going to go videotape him, I'm going to go do this so that I don't have to pay for the investigator. There's some laws you need to think about, and that's the stalking laws.
There's situations where that can be done. So he's not trying to say never do it. Just make sure that what you're not doing, or what you're doing, is not illegal.
Right. Don't take the video and confront them. Don't take the video and use it as a bargaining tool. Use the video in court. You know, turn it immediately over to your attorney. You know, don't hang on to it, because then evidence chain, they can argue with that, and you know, there's a lot of little things. Expectations of privacy. You have to have a reasonable, if they have a reasonable expectation of privacy, don't, like if you're going to sneak around and lift up over the top of their back fence and take video, they have a reasonable expectation of privacy that 6 foot or whatever fence is going to keep their doings inside that yard private. Don't break that.
Yeah, that's interesting, because a lot of people think, well, I'll just point my camera over the top of the over the top of the fence, or I'll do, or maybe even look through a knot hole in the fence or something.
Right.
Look, those people have a reasonable expectation of privacy.
Exactly. Anything that can be filmed from public ground, you can videotape till you're blue in the face.
So if some guy's claiming that he can't work because he got a bad back and then he goes out off-roading out in public land, you can film
Right.
that all day long secretly without anybody being aware.
Or if he's in his house, say he's got his drapes open and you're standing on the street, you can videotape whatever you can see there. If he's got the drapes closed with just a little slit, that doesn't mean you can run up and look through it and videotape. He has a reasonable expectation of privacy when he closes those drapes.
I close my drapes.
Trespassing. Be very careful of trespassing. It's not trespassing to stand on public ground no matter how close you are to their property. If you step on their property, that can be considered trespassing. So you might want to keep that in mind.
But I wasn't doing any harm. I was standing in the driveway.
But it's his driveway.
Okay.
Okay? Single party state, when you take a recording, if you're recording two people while they're making a plan or
discussing
intimate
something.
or whatever, you can't use it unless one of those people knows they're being recorded. That doesn't mean you hiding in the closet can record them and say, well, I knew. You're not part of the conversation. So keep that in mind.
So what that means, and this is funny because some people don't get that, they think one party consent means the person being recorded has to consent, but when you think about it, if you're a part of the conversation and you know you're being recorded, you are the person consenting to being recorded. What they could call it also is they could also call it the I don't have to tell you I'm recording us if I'm aware it's being recorded, even if you don't and you haven't given your consent, because I've given my consent.
Right.
Okay. Now, hey, let me ask you this question. What if we're on the phone and we're both in the state of Utah? Do I have to tell you that if I'm doing it over the phone? What if you're in a state that doesn't have one-party consent? What if you are on the phone in a state where the law is you cannot make a recording of someone without that person's knowledge and consent?
Yeah. You want
to know what I think on that? I think that if I'm in Utah where it's a one-party consent state and you're in another state that doesn't have that, I cannot record that because, well, it depends on what the judge might do, and frankly, we know that that's come down either way. Some courts have said, well, if it's a one-party consent state where you're located, then that's okay. Others have said, no, if it's not both states. So I actually had a friend recently who asked me that question, saying, we're in different states. Now, fortunately, both states were one-party consent states, so she had nothing to worry about. But if you're ever unsure, my advice is don't record, because you may unwittingly be violating state or even federal wiretap laws.
Exactly. And if you're not sure, call and ask somebody. Don't hesitate to call and make sure. I'd much rather you call, embarrass yourself by asking the question than doing it and then find out you're in more trouble than you can handle.
You'll recover from a little embarrassment.
Right.
It's a lot easier than having to deal with a fine or jail.
Right. I do most of my interviews. I don't tell people I'm interviewing. I don't tell people I'm recording.
He's secretly recording
I
me
just
right
record
now.
them because I don't want them to worry about the recording, which a lot of people will be careful what they say because they think everyone's going to hear the recording.
Oh, hey, that brings up another question. So let's assume that we are in a one-party state, so everything's fine. Let's assume that you and I are talking. I don't know you're a private investigator. You think I'm a crook, and in this particular hypothetical, let's say I am a crook. Okay, what if I start to think that maybe I'm being recorded, and I say, hey, you're not recording this, are you? Do you have to tell me that you are?
Don't know. I've never been in that situation before. That's a good question.
My opinion is no, you don't.
You don't have to, I would think, because it's a single consent. As long as I know there's no violation
just like Shawn says, I mean, as soon as I think I'm being recorded, I might clam up. And there's no expectation of privacy when there's just two people talking to each other or something like that. So what I do, and I guess, you know what, let's be certain about this. I can't say that I've looked this up chapter and verse, but my opinion is, if that happened and you were asking me that, say, hey, are you recording this? I'd say, first of all, I'd say, why? Would you say something different if I were, Shawn?
Exactly.
The other thing I feel like I could easily say, but again, I haven't looked this up chapter and verse. It's like, come on, Shawn, I'm not recording you. Don't be so paranoid. No, like, look, you don't want to talk to me, that's fine. And then I'd get you to relax and back off and say, oh, okay, well, gee, I guess I am looking a little paranoid. I can talk. I can talk freely and candidly.
If I'm digging for information, I'll tell them no. If it's somebody like a little old lady saw an accident, I'll tell her, yes, the only reason I'm recording is so I don't misstate what you say.
Exactly. In other words, I should say this. I'm operating under the idea that somebody who's asking is somebody with something to hide.
Then
Someone who wouldn't be talking.
I would probably just tell them no and go from there.
Yeah.
You know.
Again, I'd have to look up that, but I think you're in fairly safe territory.
Right.
But I don't have chapter and verse on that.
There's several things as far as domestic side, which is like your family side of law, that I do personally. I do a lot of custody. I do infidelity, property disagreements. Alimony's big in Utah, so I look into it. If you find the woman public displays of affection or cohabitating with somebody, you have a really good shot at getting the alimony put aside. Right. So that's one of the big
things
here.
I'll step in here is like having a relationship with somebody else won't get your alimony terminated. But you say, oh look, if the alimony recipient's been denying being in any relationships, that might lead you to go, okay, well now I know that was a lie. I wonder if my ex is cohabiting. Now that's key, by the way. There are many factors. But then you could say, look, I'm going to hire the private investigator to follow him or her around
and prove that there's cohabitation.
Find out where they meet up with the paramour or the boyfriend or girlfriend, and then see if they end up heading back somewhere or something like that. Let me ask you a couple other questions, even though he wasn't anticipating this. She may still have, or he may still have, a condo or house, but that doesn't mean they actually live there.
Right.
So it could be that person says, yes, I still have a house, and it looks like I live there. Or I tell people that because I may want to keep it a secret. I don't want to tip my ex off.
Right.
But then if they end up spending all their time living over at the boyfriend's or girlfriend's house.
It's the pattern we look for.
Yeah, but if they're living with the other person, just because they own another house or rent an apartment doesn't mean that your goose is cooked.
No.
So he can tell you all about that. And it's these factors that you have to look into, and then what he can find.
And there's a level we look for in cohabitation.
So
is there male?
Yeah. If the ex goes and stays the night, and then you're able to determine that they had sexual intercourse overnight or over a weekend, is that enough?
The sexual intercourse, in the cases I've done, isn't as important as the ease of access to the house.
That's right.
Things like if she has her own key, if she comes and goes from the place while the owner's gone, that shows access. Now of course you can say, well, there's family, that kind of thing, sure, but in this situation, when you get specific with a place and a person and a relationship, you can define it differently. You can break it down. You can get the evidence you need to show that that's as much her house as the house she's renting that she's never at.
One of the worst things I've seen is when someone actually does figure out there's infidelity, either as the basis of a divorce or there's cohabiting or something like that on an alimony case, and then they run out and confront the ex and say, I've got you.
Worst thing you can do.
And there's not enough evidence. In fact, that person was cohabiting, but you tipped him off without enough evidence to persuade the court, and then what they do is they clean up their act and clear their tracks so that by the time you get into court, it's like, oh, well, I did spend a lot of time over in his or her house, but that was just a temporary thing or something like that, and then it's over.
And that's the thing. That's why I tell people, even if you see it with your own eyes, don't say anything. Get an investigator, let me go out, let me put it into evidence, and then that way the attorney can go in there and he's showing the evidence and not saying, well, this lady, because the other side's going to say, so you're all upset and you're distraught that your husband's gone. So the first person you see him talking to is the one,
Or you're paying alimony and you'll say anything about your ex to stop that.
And I've heard that one a lot.
And here's the thing. Get someone like a private investigator to not only get it right, but get enough evidence. If you and your ex have split and suddenly you show up in his or her neighborhood all the time, they're not stupid. They're going to figure out that you're trying to get some dirt on them, and they'll clean up their act.
Exactly. Yeah. And then don't think they're not looking. Because trust me, alimony out of a guy's pocket or a girl's pocket, which I've done cases where the girl made the more money. Either way, alimony is something they don't want to give out, and they will change their habits and get sneaky to keep from giving it up. So I've been doing this long enough, and most investigators that do this kind of work, we know what we're doing, and we can get in there, get the video, and get out without their knowing, and that's the key.
That's why I have Shawn here, is because he did that very thing for an alimony case, where we sought to terminate alimony, and the alimony recipient denied the whole thing, and we got the dirt.
Yep. So you wanted me to tell you a couple of little stories.
Yeah. We thought these would be a good light note to end on.
PI is not always glamorous. I mean, I spent 6 hours in a dumpster that people were using, and all of it for a 30-second shot. But that 30-second shot was what we needed.
I'm glad it was after
case.
6 hours in the dumpster. Shawn.
Yeah. My wife hosed me off before I could even go in the house. We needed to prove he was working, and he was working next to a place where the dumpster was at. So I waited 6 hours to get that one shot of him coming out with the shirt on and dumping his garbage. Luckily, it wasn't my dumpster he dumped into. I'm one of the investigators that does whatever it takes to get the shot, and I was next to a corral taking video of a guy working his field that was supposed to be so injured he couldn't come out of his house. So I'm getting this good video, and this horse comes up and decides he wants to show me how much he cares about me. So I've got video, and about halfway through the video, this big thing comes out in front of the video, swipes across, and then the video's blurry because he decided he wanted to taste my camera and the side of my face for about 2 minutes. But I don't move. I let him go ahead and do it because I want that video. That's what I'm there for. I want that shot. Something to be aware of, make sure you look into your PI. Don't just hire the first PI. I tell people after I talk to them, go call other people and see what they say, because I'm confident in myself. But check them out. We had a guy that was trying to get some evidence of another man using drugs, and his office was on the second story. This guy brought a ladder. He actually stole a ladder from the maintenance of another company. Raised it up, climbed up on it, and took video across. Now, everybody thinks that's ingenious. The problem is, he had a reasonable expectation of privacy being 2 stories up.
Yeah, in other words, some people
from somebody with a ladder.
Some
I
people
should
might
say.
walk around without clothes on up there because they know they can't be seen, where they might not do so if they knew they were at street level. This man, just because he's doing something illegal, doesn't mean he gives up his expectation of privacy.
Exactly.
So what happened to the evidence? This guy.
The evidence was disallowed.
Yeah, he got evidence, right? He caught this guy snorting cocaine. Good evidence.
They wouldn't even look at it in the court. The judge said it was disallowed, wouldn't even allow it to be presented. So they spent a lot of money on this investigator. Now, I personally would have gone to the other building, went up, it was 5 stories, and shot down from the top of the building. There's no reasonable expectation of privacy from the top of the building down, because anybody could be up there and see what you're doing.
Or if it had a second floor.
Or a second floor with someone who let you, a hallway that came to there, or someone let you into their office to do it. There's no reasonable expectation, but from ground level and from things like ladders, you know, who's going to expect to be walking around naked, have somebody pull up with a ladder to take video of them? That's violation of the reasonable expectation of privacy. That's about all I got on my little list this time.
All right. Well, we appreciate it again. We're thankful to have Shawn back again. And before we go, for those that need a good private investigator and either want your help to find one if you're not the right fit, or if they think, no, I think that Shawn's my man, where would they go? Masterinvestigations.com, or you can call me 801-541-3802.
Okay,
thanks, Shawn. Always a pleasure.
Awesome.